Hi, welcome to Better Longer. You know, when we think about remaining healthy in middle age and beyond, one of the critical parts of that is learning how we as older people manage our energy. Not only the energy we expend in exercise, but the energy we take in as fuel. And the most important component of that for many of us is how we manage sugar or glucose and how our bodies metabolize it. We know that type 2 diabetes is something that occurs fairly commonly in people in the United States now as they age. And type 2 diabetes is an illness that you'd prefer not to get if you had your druthers. So one way to combat that enemy is to know all about it and the vocabulary associated with the dysfunction of sugar metabolism that can lead to type 2 diabetes. So what I'd like to talk about today is something called hemoglobin A1C, which is a term that is bandied about quite often, particularly in relationship to medications which can lower hemoglobin A1C. It might be useful for everybody to know what hemoglobin A1C is. If you think back to your high school science classes, hemoglobin is the molecule that transports oxygen from the lungs to other tissues. Hemoglobin is a dark maroon molecule that turns brighter red when the iron within it has oxygen to carry. And that is hemoglobin's great function within our bodies. Hemoglobin lives within the red blood cells traveling through our bloodstream. And red blood cells last, on average, about 3 months before they are recycled. So the hemoglobin sits in the bloodstream for about 3 months and is exposed to all the chemicals in your blood for about 3 months' time. And that's very useful for people who track blood sugar in patients. I'm going to take you back to when you were a kid. You probably saw this demonstration of boiling water and then adding sugar to the boiling water, and then sugar disappears and it looks just like water. And then you put it in a cup and dangle a string in that cup, and within a couple of days, you have crystallized rock candy on the string, and it's amazing that the sugar came out of solution and stuck to something. Well, in a very small molecular way, that's an analogy to what happens to hemoglobin over time. There's a kind of hemoglobin called hemoglobin A1, and when hemoglobin A1 is found to have sugar stuck to it, that type of hemoglobin A1 is called hemoglobin A1C. Now, it turns out you shouldn't have a great deal of hemoglobin A1C in your bloodstream. And in fact, if you have 5.7% of hemoglobin A1C in your bloodstream, that by definition is called pre-diabetes. And that situation is true for people who have a hemoglobin A1C of about 5.7% to 6.4%. And if your hemoglobin A1C is 6.5% or greater, you have type 2 diabetes. When you have blood tests drawn to test your sugar level, usually when you are fasted, your sugar level can be normal, even though you might have a hemoglobin A1C that is high. How can that be? Well, the fasting sugar level tells us what your glucose is in your bloodstream at the moment of the blood test. On the other hand, the hemoglobin A1C looks back over your life for the preceding several months while that hemoglobin sat around in your bloodstream. So even though you may have a normal blood sugar on the day of your exam, the hemoglobin A1C is very useful because it gives us a look back into what your blood sugar has been like over a long period of time. And if your hemoglobin A1C is greater than 5.6, 5.7 or greater, it means that your blood has been exposed to more sugar than is healthy for you. And that is the value of checking hemoglobin A1C in patients. And that is why people who are on medications to lower their blood sugar pay special attention to their hemoglobin A1C.